For the 40th anniversary of Zelda, I wanted to take a look at one of the most infamous parts of the series, the timeline. The Zelda timeline has been a point of controversy since its release in 2011. The biggest problem to me is the inclusion of the Fallen timeline, as it just feels like a last minute thought. So let's see if we can fix it. The idea of the Fallen timeline starts long before the timeline was created. Ocarina of Time was originally being developed as a prequel to A Link to the Past to depict the imprisoning war. As development progressed, the game started to divert from the source material. Despite the liberties Ocarina took in depicting the imprisoning war, A Link to the Past could still be viewed as a sequel. Not too much later, Nintendo released The Wind Waker, which depicts events supposed to follow after Ocarina. Finally, Twilight Princess releases as a sequel to Ocarina of Time, and we start to see the problem. They created 3 sequels to Ocarina that can't all exist. They contradict each other. So the answer to this blight was to separate them into 3 branches off of the timeline. So how does this split even work? Well, Ocarina of Time conveniently features time travel, the perfect explanation for timeline branching. In the events of the game, Link pulls the Master Sword, and Ganon gets into the Sacred Realm. Link is unable to wield the sword at his young age, and he's put into a stasis for 7 years. Ganon is able to take over the world, and when Link wakes up, he must stop him. Now, this isn't really time travel, it's just a really long nap. However, at some point, Link returns to the sword pedestal and learns he can go back to the time before he pulled it, effectively time traveling. However, this isn't what splits the timeline. Nothing he does in the past changes the future in any way. Functionally, Link could stay in the past for those 7 years, but of course Ganon would eventually get the spiritual stones, and the events would basically play out the same way. Even if Link died or was killed, nothing really changes beside the fact that Link doesn't kill Ganon at the end of the game. The timeline split actually occurs at the end of the game after Link defeats Ganon, where Zelda uses the Ocarina to send Link back to before he even met her to tell her everything. This allows Link to live his life with Ganon imprisoned, but this also means adult Zelda is left in that timeline without a Link. This is how we get our split, and it actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it, but the Fallen branch doesn't. For the Fallen timeline to exist, it would have to split at the same point where Link is sent back, but no such thing occurs. The sword pulling doesn't change the timeline either. The nature of the time travel is different, so splitting the timeline there doesn't make a lot of sense. As I said before, if Link did nothing, or if he died at any point in the game, it doesn't change the outcome. The idea of Link dying and letting Ganon win is like in every game, or more prominent in other games. Zelda 2, for instance, literally has a game over screen saying you revived Ganon by losing. Your lack of skill literally lets the villain win. But Ocarina has no such screen. I guess the question now, is a timeline split even necessary? I mean, Link to the Past isn't exactly a perfect sequel. Although Ocarina was intended to be a prequel to Link to the Past, there are enough differences between the two to say they aren't as closely connected. If we take a look at A Link to the Past, we learn some interesting things about its story. For starters, the story of how Ganon gets to the Sacred Realm is extremely different. His people just accidentally find the gate to the Sacred Realm. Ganon kills all of his men and actually gets the Triforce. Contrast this with Ocarina, where Ganon basically works alone and gets into the Sacred Realm thanks to Link. His wish on the Triforce ends up corrupting the Sacred Realm into the Dark World seen in game. The Triforce doesn't split for him like it does in Ocarina. Only in response to Ganon already being in the Sacred Realm is the Master Sword made, where in the normal events of the timeline, the Master Sword was fashioned in Skyward Sword long before the imprisoning war. Finally, the 7 sages only managed to actually seal the Sacred Realm after a long fought-out war. They don't just do nothing the whole game like they do in Ocarina. So in other words, it's absolutely nothing like Ocarina. So if Ocarina doesn't connect to Link to the Past as closely as we thought, is there still a timeline split, or is this just in a different universe? Well, I think there still is a timeline split. But to answer that, we got to fix a big problem with the timeline. Do you see it? Yeah, it's that. What is Four Swords Adventures doing after Twilight Princess? Four Swords Adventures should be with its sister games, Minish Cap and Four Swords. Now, Four Swords Adventure is before Ocarina of Time. Four Sword has Ganon before he debuts in Ocarina. And Ganondorf is mentioned before his debut as well. And now I'm making it worse by repeating everything you're saying into this microphone. Well, if Four Sword Adventures can't be before Ocarina, then this and the other two games are migrating into the Fallen timeline. And I think this actually works. You see, if you take Four Sword Adventures map, we see it bears a striking resemblance to A Link to the Past's map, almost one-to-one besides this wintry area in the south. But wouldn't you know it, in the credits of the game, this place melts, leaving tons of water around. One could say all the ice melting creates a swamp, the very swamp we could see in A Link to the Past. The similarities don't just end there. You see, apparently in this game, Ganondorf and the Gerudo exist. However, Vaddie helps Ganondorf or something, and Ganondorf becomes the Ganon we fight at the end of the game. Is it possible that this parallels Ocarina, even just a little? I mean, there are 7 maidens, just like in A Link to the Past, that function just like the sages. And if Ganondorf only shortly became Ganon in Four Sword Adventures, then this most likely would be the Fallen timeline equivalent to what Ocarina was. Only somewhat, though, as it's much more a parallel than an equivalent, as the Four Sword replaces the Master Sword, and Vaddie is also there for some reason. So this just leaves one question. If Four Swords is a prequel to Link to the Past and features Ganon, could the Four Sword become the Master Sword in this timeline where it was made specifically to kill Ganon? After all, we know from A Link to the Past that its creation is different than that of the rest of the timeline. So it's possible. I mean, how is the original Master Sword created in Skyward Sword? With magic fire sanctuaries. And what do you do to the Four Sword in all 3 games? You bathe it in magic fire sanctuaries. Furthermore, the Four Sword fits the Link to the Past description of a blade forged with sacred power. The Four Sword is full of it. All that you would need to do is switch the duplication function off, add some Master Ore, which is an item in-game, and there you go, Master Sword. This could definitely work. The Minish Cap supports this idea even more, as the Picori blade is literally described as a sword from the people of the sky. It starts out as a simple blade and then becomes stronger in almost an identical way to the way the Master Sword becomes stronger in Skyward Sword. So identical, in fact, that they could be the same sword. But is that possible? Is the Fallen timeline simply a silent for all the 2D games, or is it truly a branch? Can the Fallen timeline be a branch off of Skyward Sword? Well, let's see. In Skyward Sword, there's an interesting segment at the end of the game where, after completing Skyview Temple and receiving all 3 pieces of the Triforce, Link basically wishes that the temple falls on the imprisoned. This defeats the imprisoned for good, and everyone is saved. Then Girahim uses the time travel thing to bring Zelda back to the past to use as a sacrifice to Demise, after Hylia has just imprisoned him. In other words, even though the imprisoned is dead in the present, Demise could rise again if we don't defeat him in the past. And Link obviously defeats him, and this leads to Demise being put into the Master Sword, and the game ends from there. But this is where a question arises. Is this a good old bootstrap paradox, where Demise is dead in the past, and we already killed him in the present, so there is no effect on the timeline? Well, I don't think so. See, Demise being dead in the past is extremely important. It changes everything. Girahim has no motive, no way to resurrect Demise, because he is purged from that timeline. No Demise, and no Girahim, means Zelda is never kidnapped, Link never needs to get the Skyward Sword and forge it into the Master Sword, and the Skyloftians possibly never go down to the surface. Okay, forget that last part. I mean, it's entirely possible, that the Skyloftians never leave Skyloft. For the sake of this argument, let's just say at some point some of them go down. This means that there's a Sky People with a sword that can appear in the Minish Cap, a Master Sword that has not been touched, not been upgraded, and could become the Force Sword, which later can be turned into the Master Sword. Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we have a new and improved Fallen Hero timeline, which I will be dubbing the Fallen Sword timeline. This branch begins in Skyward Sword after Link defeats Demise in the past. That time is safe from the imprisoned and Girahim, and the Master Sword isn't fashioned. Eventually, the Kingdom of Hyrule is populated and established before the events of the Minish Cap. The royal family keep a sword from the heavens, much like how Zelda's family kept it in Skyward Sword, where it is dubbed the Picori Blade. Through the Four Swords trilogy, the blade is fashioned into the Force Sword, where it defeats Vati 3 times and Ganon once. After this, and before the events of A Link to the Past, Ganon finds the Sacred Realm, and this Force Sword is forged with the Master Ore to become the blade that is the bane to the darkness. It's placed in its pedestal after the Imprisoning War, and sits there until the events of A Link to the Past, where Link kills Ganon using the Master Sword. The sword is then kept in the Lost Woods until the events of A Link Between Worlds, where it is pulled again and vanquishes you, Ganon. The Master Sword is again put away and becomes lost to time as we enter Echoes of Wisdom and the first 2 Zelda games, where it is nothing more than a legend. Or something like that. So what do you think? Do you love my proposed Fallen timeline, or do you just think I'm dumb because I don't understand how time travel works and I'm very wrong? I want to hear your thoughts. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.